Hey everyone, welcome back to Web3 Deep Dive Podcast. Today we are here in Denton, Texas on location at the Core Scientific Bitcoin Mining Center. We've got a little bit of wind and a little bit of Bitcoin mining in the background, so it's a bit loud, but I'm so excited to be interviewing Russell Cann. He is the Chief Development Officer at Core Scientific. So let's get started with today's interview. Hi Russell, how are you?
Good to see you again, Rachel.
Yeah, well, thanks for being here. And I'm so excited because you are hosting us at the Core Scientific facility.
That's right. We're in Denton, Texas, just outside of Dallas. This is one of our largest sites. We're currently running about 200 megawatts here. The total site's 300 megawatts.
Wow, yeah, it's an amazing facility. One of the largest data centers, Bitcoin mining centers that I've ever seen. So thank you for having us.
Absolutely, anytime.
Yeah, Russell, before we get started, maybe tell our listeners a little bit about yourself, what you do at Core Scientific, and then we'll go into some questions.
Certainly. I'm the Chief Development Officer, which just means I'm in charge of revenue. I've been at Core from the beginning, 2017. And we've expanded from that time from one site in North Carolina to our sites in Georgia, Kentucky, Texas, Oklahoma, and North Dakota now. So I've been here the whole time. My role has changed over the years several times from operations strategy, but everything's kind of revolved around the revenue generation side.
Great. Let's talk a little bit about Core Scientific. So Core Scientific, is it fair to say it's one of the largest Bitcoin miners in the world or North America? I mean, how would you describe it?
Certainly one of the largest public companies in North America. So for several years, we've produced more Bitcoin than any other public company. There may be other companies around the world that produce more, but from a public company perspective, for the past several years, we've been the largest from a productivity standpoint.
Wonderful. And how many mining facilities does Core have?
So right now we operate in North Carolina, 2 sites in Georgia, 2 sites in Texas. We have a site under development in Oklahoma. We have a site in Austin, which is an AI site, not a Bitcoin site. And we have a site in North Dakota.
Let's talk a little bit about Bitcoin mining and AI data centers. Can you tell us a little bit about that connection and how those two may work?
So certainly, both are application-specific data centers, and what that means is we design data centers around what processing we're going to be doing and what hardware we're going to be using. So interesting enough, in Bitcoin mining, it's very simple. We use Bitcoin mining ASICs. In the world of AI, though, it's a GPU stack, and what has happened very recently, just in the past couple of years, the power footprint of the GPU stack for AI, particularly large language models and Gen AI and inference, has moved to much closer match that we're seeing in the Bitcoin mining world. For instance, 20 years ago when you built a data center, a rack for those computers might have 5 kilowatts at it. Then it slowly moved to 15 kilowatts a rack. And then right now, we just deployed a site in Austin with 65 kilowatts at the rack. We have sites in design right now at 125 to 150 kilowatts per rack. And we're actually doing a modular design that goes up much higher than that. So that footprint that AI GPUs is using from a power perspective has actually moved a lot closer to Bitcoin mining. So why that's important is we have built data centers for Bitcoin mining. And if you look at our data centers, you got to tour some today. Those data centers are actually a traditional data center that has been stripped down to make it the most efficient Bitcoin mining center you can. So if you look at a Bitcoin mining site and say an AI site, from Core Scientific's perspective, from the substation to the medium voltage distribution inside the data center itself, everything is kind of the same. Now, from the substation up, it's different. For a Bitcoin mining load, you have a flexible power load. But for an AI site, I need to have a firm load, meaning I need to have continuous power all the time. But from the substation to that medium voltage distribution, they're the same. Now, inside that powered shell, you can then do Bitcoin mining, which we have here, or you can have a powered shell that you then fill with modules that have AI compute, whether those are NVIDIA or AMD or whoever your hardware manufacturer is. So from a facility standpoint, those things are similar. Now, from a data standpoint, your fiber needs and your data throughput needs for a AI facility are just pale what you need, or it's just grossly different for what you need for Bitcoin mining. For Bitcoin mining, the amount of data that flows back and forth from the actual processing to the network itself is small. But for AI, true AI, you need a lot of throughput and you need multiple sources. So your power footprint can look very similar, your shells can look very similar, but your fiber footprint is going to be very different. Now, in general, I would say that the skill set required are 2 different skill sets. they can move back and forth, but the training needed for your technicians is going to be very different. At Core, I think we have an interesting dynamic in that we were a bunch of data center people that got into Bitcoin mining, and now we're getting into AI. So basically, you take a lot of folks with data center experience, and then you give them the experience of the speed and iterative nature of Bitcoin mining, and then you put them into AI, and they take what they've learned, that speed and iteration that you learn in Bitcoin mining, and we're applying it to AI, and it means we're attacking that AI space at a way most traditional data center operators can't, because they just have not done it before. So I think at Core, that's one of our competitive advantages is that experience that we've had as a Bitcoin miner, which is crazy to say. But I wouldn't say if someone just came into Bitcoin mining that they could produce and manage an AI data center. The skill sets are not, they don't cross over each other. So I don't think every Bitcoin miner can be an AI operator, but I do think there are sites that can be, but it's going to take a lot of design changes.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about the Core Scientific CoreWeave partnership. Because with CoreWeave, and correct me if I'm wrong here, is it Core Scientific entered into a 12-year agreement with CoreWeave to do AI compute?
So our agreement with CoreWeave, yes, it's 12 years with 2 5-year options. And basically, in those situations, we're designing and building a data center for them, or converting our data centers to AI compute data centers. CoreWeave they own the hardware and the software stack, and CoreWeave has the end client that would end up using that hardware and software stack. So Core Scientific is the data center operator and the facilities operator, design build, and CoreWeave owns and operates the hardware and owns and operates the software stack. Now, because I mentioned before, we're building application-specific data centers, that hardware stack and that software stack are very important, and CoreWeave is very much involved in the conversion designs that we're using, because to build an application-specific data center and have an efficient data center, you have to know exactly what hardware you're going to be bringing in and exactly what kind of software stack is going to be, I should say, what applications are going to be run, because the applications and the hardware stack can help define where you need redundancy and where you don't need redundancy, where you need a firm load, where you can have extra backup for power. It tells you things like how much throughput you need from your fiber network. So all those things are important, and all those things are inputs into that piece. So CoreWeave and Core Scientific work closely on the design when we're converting sites from Bitcoin mining to AI, because we have to know exactly the hardware and software pieces that CoreWeave is bringing to the table.
Right, and you mentioned that not every Bitcoin mining facility or every Bitcoin miner will be able to host AI compute. But with Core Scientific, it kind of made sense also because you had a previous relationship with CoreWeave, right?
Now, I would say the easiest thing there is there's a 5-year relationship of trust. And CoreWeave is also aware that Core Scientific is not new to the AI game. We actually we had the first NVIDIA DGX rated data center in one of our centers in 2019. So in 2019, we also started working with CoreWeave. And that doesn't sound like a long time, but in the world of Bitcoin mining or in the world of AI, 5 years is a long relationship. So I don't think that most Bitcoin miners can become AI folks, and I don't think that Core Scientific would have had an easier time building the trust with somebody else on such I should say the trust did not come because of a simple conversation. There was 5 years of trust there. We ran tens of thousands of GPUs for the CoreWeave team for years, and they know our sites. And I will also say that all of our sites can't convert to AI. That's not the case. What we did at Core Scientific was we looked at our whole portfolio, and we actually made decisions around which sites would be best to convert to an AI site, to an application-specific data center for AI. Now, what's interesting about that is it actually gives us, from a Bitcoin mining side, an opportunity to say, hey, if we had to do it again, how would we design a new Bitcoin mining site? You're sitting in our latest version right here in Denton, and it's an engineering marvel when it comes to air-cooled mining. We're in Texas in the summer, and everything's running. We have the same design going on in West Texas, where it's even warmer right now, and everything is running. So it's a great design. But when we sit back and say, okay, if we had to do it again, because we were, and for a while, we've been the largest Bitcoin miner, but we had to do it again, what would we do? And oddly enough, if you take and say, okay, these sites here actually make better AI sites, it gives us an opportunity to then backfill some of that portfolio mix with better Bitcoin mining sites as well. So this past year, while we kind of shifted into this AI piece, it's really given us a lot of time to think about how we would become even more efficient Bitcoin miners.
Got it. Interesting. Can we talk a little bit about the profitability side of things when a Bitcoin miner also hosts AI compute?
Yes. So before we talk about profitability, though, let's talk about CapEx and the amount of cash that's involved in building the two sites, because if you jump right into profits, you don't necessarily understand why they're so different. So I can build this site here for about $500,000 a megawatt. And right now, if I wanted to put some pretty decent machines in it that process the Bitcoin network, I could do that for another $500,000 a megawatt. So for $1 million a megawatt, I can sit you in this facility right here. So that 50 megawatt building out there, I can tell you for $50 million, I could replicate that building somewhere else on this site. In the world of AI compute, that number is vastly different. My infrastructure costs are going to be $8 million to $13 million a megawatt, depending on what my cooling is going to look like. If I'm using direct liquid cooling, direct at the chip cooling, it's going to be a little bit higher. If I'm doing air cool, it might be a little bit lower. But if you want to use a round number, say it's $10 million a megawatt just for the infrastructure. On top of that, if I'm filling it with GPU compute that is out right now, I'm about another $25 million a megawatt. If I'm filling it with the newest iterative versions of the Blackwell, the B100s, the B200s that are liquid cooled, I'm more like $50 million a megawatt for compute. So let's just say I took this site and I wanted to fill it with Blackwell. All of a sudden, I am at $60 million a megawatt. So that's significantly different than $1 million a megawatt. So you asked me about profitability, but I wanted to make it clear that a barrier to entry in the AI space is not just engineering know-how and operations know-how, but it's also, and power footprint and fiber, it's also capital. The capital stack is incredibly different. Now, because of that, though, profitability is different as well. In Bitcoin mining, and you know this, we've been doing this at Core for a long time now, Bitcoin mining can be incredibly profitable, but it's also very volatile. So profits go up and down, up and down. And when it's profitable, it's hugely profitable. And when it's not, things like reorganizations of a company's balance sheet have to happen. So Bitcoin profitability is volatile. The profitability for AI, though, is very high. Margins are high. We're seeing margins in the 80% range for sites that we're converting. So 80% margin on our cost, or excuse me, on our revenue. But that margin comes with incredible investment. And it's flat. 80% is great. I'm not complaining about 80%. No one is. But it's contracted. So we contract for those sites. We contract for the power. So I know what I'm going to make, which is why when we talk about, say, the CoreWeave contracts that we have and the options we have, we talk about the fact that over a period of the 12-year contract, we can very specifically tell you how much revenue we're going to make, and we can pretty closely tell you exactly what our costs are going to be, because we know in our contract what it's going to take for us to maintain the mechanical and electrical infrastructure, what it's going to take to maintain security. We have a good understanding of what our costs are going to be. In the world of Bitcoin, I cannot tell you what hash price is going to be tomorrow. I can't tell you what hash price is going to be this afternoon, much less 6 months or a year from now. There's so many inputs. It's a global footprint. And you have the manufacturing base of ASICs coming online. You have the price of Bitcoin that affects it. So there's just so many variables that we can't control. So you have the volatile nature of Bitcoin profitability is just so different from the contracted revenue associated and margin that's associated with AI revenue. Interesting enough, you blend the two together, it makes a pretty nice business model. Because here we can have the very volatile nature of Bitcoin. So when it's up, it's up. When it's up a lot. So if you're able to have Bitcoin mining sites that can take advantage of high transaction fees and high hash price, you can earn outsized returns on those very specific times that happens. And then you can have that very nice high margin return on your AI that covers a lot, that more than covers your operating costs as a company. So it could be a good combo, and I think that's the path we're on right now.
Yeah, I mean.
Sorry, I talk with my hands too much.
No, it's great. I mean, if I was a Bitcoin miner, I would want to be like Core Scientific, and I think we're seeing, it's not only Core, but it's like a few of these other miners are able to do that with AI compute and hosting that. But it just, like you mentioned, Bitcoin mining is volatile. It's kind of scary in a way. I mean, and I think that having that AI compute really helps balance it out and kind of takes away from that, not knowing, I guess. So it seems great, but as you mentioned, it costs a lot to do that. It's not just going to happen overnight.
So our deal with CoreWeave is very specific in that we're responsible for a certain amount of the CapEx, and they're responsible for a larger lift on that CapEx. So we were able to, in this case, use CoreWeave's balance sheet to infuse the cash to do the conversions of our data centers. In return for that, they get a great operating partner. They get a great rate, on their data center usage. So it works out financially very well for CoreWeave, but it also works out very well for Core Scientific, because if we had to go and build out sites that cost $10 million a megawatt, and it's a 300 megawatt site, and it's $3 billion. We don't have $3 billion on our balance sheet right now. So the deal we worked with CoreWeave is a win-win scenario in our case. They get a great operating partner, they get a great revenue rate, or great cost of goods sold rate for them. But in our case, we get to use their balance sheet to help fund that very expensive infrastructure cost.
Definitely, yes. It's a great partnership. I want to switch gears a little bit because there's a lot of controversy around Bitcoin mining. And I want our listeners to understand that Bitcoin mining could be energy efficient. Can you explain how it works?
Yeah, so it is absolutely crazy. All energy usage is not bad energy usage. If I am cutting down redwood forests and I'm burning those redwoods to produce energy, that's probably a bad thing. If I'm killing baby seals and I'm throwing them in the furnace and I'm using that to make power, that's probably a bad thing. But if I'm using nuclear, or I'm using wind, or I'm using solar, those things actually or hydro, those things don't actually have any negative fuel input cost. More importantly, though, is the flexibility that Bitcoin mining provides to the utility grid. And what I mean by that flexibility is Bitcoin mining, because I can turn off our entire site very quickly, it allows a utility operator to increase their base load. And by increasing their base load and curtailing us, they actually rely less on peaker plants, and they rely less on peaker plant loads. Those peaker plant loads are incredibly dirty and incredibly expensive. If you think about, like, when you have a gas grill at home, when you turn that gas on, gas is escaping. I then light it. It's a little bit cleaner because the gas is not escaping into the air. But then when I throw my ribeyes on there and I close the grill, I've now encapsulated everything inside that grill. Now, when I turn it off, I open the grill and I turn it off, all that bad particulate escapes from the grill. A peaker plant is like that. If I just turn on a natural gas plant and I'm running it, then that natural gas plant, when it's running, is incredibly efficient and incredibly clean. It's the turning on and turning off process that's expensive and dirty. And that's what a peaker plant is. And grids have to rely on peaker plants whenever they've misaligned the supply and demand from generation to folks need it in their homes or folks need it in the municipal complex. So it's that supply demand and balancing that supply demand that utility grids work on every day. What a Bitcoin miner provides that utility grid is kind of like half of a battery that they can attach to their grid, because all of a sudden, this site here is 300 megawatts when fully built out. I can tell the local grid, hey, we're going to take 300 megawatts of base load from you, and they can increase their base load, which is efficient and less expensive. I can increase that base load, but when it's needed, you can turn us off, and you can turn us off in a matter of seconds. Our whole site can go down. It's not even measured in minutes anymore. So when we turn off our load, all that generation is then available for the rest of the grid. So even though you hear folks talk about, hey, Bitcoin mining, because it uses power, that's bad, not all power is bad. If we have power that provides resiliency to the grid and provides higher base load that can be curtailed, all that actually ends up making the grid more efficient. And efficiency is cost and clean. And that's what happens when you have more efficiency, because any grid that wants to operate, they want the power that's generated, they want as much of it as possible to reach the end user, because that's how they get paid. And old infrastructure is going to have more resistance in that transmission. So if I'm buying extra base load and it's profitable to the utility grid, they're able to put more investment into the grid, improve the grid. If I'm able to I'm a buyer of last resort, I'm putting more money into the grid. We're the largest revenue source for many of our utility companies in areas that we operate in. And interesting enough, that goes to improve their grid and lower the power costs for other users on the same grid, especially in areas where we're in co-ops. Folks literally see their power bill go down, because at Core Scientific, we eat all the operating costs. We eat all that fixed cost. So because we provide a big revenue source, for those folks, but when they need it, they turn us off, and that power goes right to the grid.
Right. So with AI compute, though, it's different. I'm just wondering, should we be more concerned about the energy use with AI compute?
So, yes and no.
Okay.
It is very different. It is a firm load for AI compute, which means you don't have the flexibility that you have with Bitcoin mining. However, for AI compute, the interesting thing is the revenue that an AI workload is willing to pay for that power is actually much higher than the cost of power generation. And why that's interesting is now all of a sudden, if the cost of generation is, say, 4 cents a kilowatt hour, and they're selling to me at Core Scientific for our Bitcoin mining at 4.5 cents, they're making a smaller margin. That same 4 cents a kilowatt hour for generation, though, sold to an AI on a firm load, they might get 7, 8, or 9 cents. Now, all of a sudden, that huge margin is lots of profit. In most of America, utilities are regulated, and the amount of profit they can send to shareholders is regulated. Otherwise, everything has to go back into the grid as an investment. So I think what we're going to see, this is my opinion, not that of our publicly traded company, Core Scientific, I think what we're going to see is this AI demand, because it's at such a higher revenue stream and such a higher margin for the power companies, we're going to see power companies make outsized profits. But because most power companies inside the United States anyway are in regulated markets where only so much can go to the shareholders, the rest has to go investment into the grid. We're going to see a lot of investment in the grid. That investment in the grid is going to be improved transmission, which are more efficient. It's going to be new generation, which new generation by default is going to be clean generation, because if you had an option to build new generation, are you going to build generation that has a fuel input cost or has zero fuel input cost? You're going to build new generation that has zero fuel input cost, because like the hydro dams that are all over this country, that water just runs. I don't have to pay for that. It runs, and I'm producing power from it. So I think what we're going to see in the world of AI is Bitcoin mining provides flexible load, which is good for the grid. AI is going to buy up everything, but at high margins, and it's going to lead to a lot of investment in the grid. And we're going to see investment in our grid that we haven't seen since the end of World War II, when we come out and had to build massive grid in the United States, because right at the end of World War II, the United States had to manufacture everything for the whole planet. So we had this massive infrastructure investment. We have not had that in the United States since then. And I think all the margins going to be provided by AI is we're going to see a lot of investment in the utility grid in the U.S. And interesting enough, it's not going to be in your major metro areas, because AI is learning that in order to find a 300 megawatt site or 200 megawatt site, you've got to go out. So unlike traditional data centers that try to co-locate around very big markets, we're going to see some of this AI workload spread out. And we're going to see that AI workload spread out. So we're going to see it improve the utility grid kind of across the U.S.
When you say spread out, do you mean?
Geographically spread out. So away from, we're in Denton now.
Yeah, I would
consider Denton out. We're part of Dallas, but we're not in downtown Dallas.
We're out there,
right?
yeah.
Right? And it's kind of like Bitcoin mining. Our Bitcoin mining site in Georgia is not in Atlanta, but it's in Dalton, which is very close to Atlanta. Our site in Marble, North Carolina is 2 hours north of Atlanta, whereas traditional data centers want to be right in downtown in a metro area, because when these things first started coming online, fiber connectivity was very important. Well, in America now, our fiber is actually getting pretty good, not just in the U.S., but in Canada and lots of parts of the world. The fiber connectivity has really, the fiber map has spread out. And having that fiber spread out means that we can actually take these large sites and we can move them further out from metro America, the big NFL markets. So I think the benefit from that is going to be that the utility grid is going to become enhanced throughout the United States. And I'm talking very specifically the United States. Of course, there's AI demand in North America, in the Middle East. There's AI demand in Europe. There's AI demand in Southeast Asia. But for Core Scientific, we're talking specifically right now the AI demand that's being driven by the large tech companies that are all U.S.-based. And then outside the U.S., we're seeing a lot of government driving demand as well.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I guess there's, Texas, we have land, so we might be seeing a lot more of that happening here in Texas as well.
I think so. So anywhere you have a large power footprint available, and you have the fiber connectivity, will be a place that you can probably see data centers. I will say, like in Texas, Again, here's another example. I don't need to be in downtown Dallas or downtown Houston or even downtown Austin. I need to be close enough that I can have some good fiber access. But I think we're going to see that everywhere. But Texas, I think, is going to be one of those that benefits, much like it's benefiting from Bitcoin mining, providing the flexible load for ERCOT. Really works well for like an ERCOT, that flexible load. It's going to be the same situation where it's going to work pretty well where utility companies are selling to AI and they're taking that extra finance or that extra margin and they're plowing it into the grid.
Definitely. I think Texas is obviously a very friendly place for Bitcoin mining. I mean, I can't imagine a Bitcoin mining or AI center in like Napa, California, in the middle of wine country, right? Like, I just think that there are places where Bitcoin miners are a bit more welcomed.
Yeah, so, at Core Scientific, we love Texas, and we have large operations here, but we also have large operations in Georgia. It's very friendly to data centers. We have large operations in North Carolina. It's our oldest site, one of my favorite sites. It sits in a beautiful valley. We have a large operation in North Dakota. We have a large operation being developed in Oklahoma. And all those are also friendly, not just to Bitcoin mining, but also data centers in general, because they check those boxes where I talked about. We have power generation, we have fiber available. So I think we're going to see, it's not just Texas, I think we're going to see the data center development for the AI world really web out.
Got it.
Inside the United States.
Yeah. Russell, I wanted to ask you, there was a room, one of the rooms that we went into was very hot here at this facility. Can you explain what that room, what was it, 150 degrees?
Probably so. So that was a hot aisle you were in, and it's very hot.
The hot aisle?
So what happens in the world of Bitcoin mining, this is all passive cooled facility. So we have a filter wall where air's filter comes in. There is a big fan wall where we take and compress air and move it into what's called the cold aisle. So we're pushing a lot of cold air in, but that cold air then goes across the chips on the Bitcoin, on the PCB boards have those ASIC chips that mine, that process the Bitcoin network, and those ASIC chips get hot. So all that hot air gets exhausted in a contained area called the hot aisle, and then for us, it goes out through the roof. But if you're standing in the hot aisle outside of Dallas, Texas in August, it is hot. It is very hot. But what we do is, because we contain all that heat and then it goes up and escapes, it really means that our footprint for cooling is lower. So we don't have to use any kind of mechanical infrastructure to keep our facilities cool. We just use the passive air that comes from the fans themselves.
So when it's really cold, because it can get very cold in Denton, when it's really cold and there's snow on the ground, will that hot air actually melt the snow when it goes out?
It will.
That's
yes.
so cool.
Yeah, and you'll see that, maybe not here you won't see it as much, but say our North Dakota site you'll see it, or our Marble, North Carolina site you can see it. And you can actually see as the snow is falling, you can see the snow falling, and then you'll see it melt as it hits the hot air coming out of things. Now, I will say, and this totally makes sense, so you'll understand when I say it. In the wintertime, the hot aisle is actually very comfortable because you only have a delta T where you change in temperature from the cold aisle across the chips into the hot aisle. And when you're cold aisle, the input air is much lower, of course. Matter of fact, in Grand Forks, North Dakota, in the wintertime, the hot aisle is a coveted place to work out of because it's warm there.
Yeah, I mean, it's also interesting. It could be, when it's so cold and people are struggling to have heat in the winter, that's actually an interesting use case, right?
So
that provides heat.
It is, and I think this is again my opinion. After being in this space for a while, I think one of the next iterations of efficiency in Bitcoin mining is going to be, and we're already seeing this, by the way. So I'm not just making this up myself. Is how do we use that waste heat, either for heating, for greenhouse heating, or if you're in a municipal area heating buildings. So, or using that heat to then turn around and produce more power, so you make your site more efficient. But I think the next iteration of efficiency in Bitcoin mining design, and we're seeing this with immersion and water cooled, because let's take an immersion site where you're taking the heat and you're removing it using oil, or you're taking a water cooled site and you're removing the heat from using water. You can then very easily, you have to remove that heat from the oil or from the water itself. Well, removing that heat, all of a sudden you have a valuable energy product right there that you can use. So I think the next iteration is going to happen in Bitcoin mining. And what I mean by that is by 2028 halving or by the 2032 halving is we're going to have to figure out how to use that waste heat and put it back to the grid, or use the heat in some other meaningful way. It totally makes sense if I'm in Grand Forks because or Canada and I'm mining, because all of a sudden I could have a greenhouse that I operate very warmly in the wintertime, and I can produce vegetables real easy. And that's just one example. We have some manufacturers that have made URAC miners, and they take the heat from it, and the waste heat can then be used as actually a heating source. So I'll be interested to see exactly how that engineering happens, but I think that's going to be something that has to happen is using that waste heat.
Definitely. Russell, anything you want to add that I didn't already ask you about?
That's a good question. I would just say I'm pretty excited about the world of AI right now. And I am interested to see how it blends with the application-specific data centers we're building. And I'm interested to see how the world of Bitcoin, or not just Bitcoin, but blockchain and AI kind of merge together. I'm interested to see where the business models on AI happen. Right now, everyone's infatuated with large language models because they love going on ChatGPT and others. But we're already seeing that small language models are where revenue is going to be generated. We're already seeing AI being used this is horrible, but AI being used to enhance advertising, a la the Minority Report, where you're having purpose-built advertising for people. So, but I think the low-hanging fruit for AI is going to be, or I should say, the question people are asking is where are the business models that are going to support AI and support all this demand? But I think it's coming quickly with advertising at first. Then it's going to be small language models that go into call center replacement. We're already seeing it in the world of medical research. Again, you hate to see this, but what's happening first is you're seeing big pharma companies use AI to enhance their patents. So taking drugs that are coming off patent or very close to it, using AI to help modify those drugs to then extend the life of the patent. All those things are good because, like in the world of drug discovery, the next step of that is going to be new drug discovery. So I do think there's a lot of positive things going to come from AI, but the business models are going to iterate pretty quickly there to become profitable. That can also be very scary. There's absolutely scary things in the world of artificial intelligence. We should probably delete this, but I hope we're not part of the scary part, right? Because there are some scary things that can happen, especially in the world of military that some of us talk about a lot. But I'm super excited. Otherwise, I'd retire and live in the Sunshine State or something. But I'm excited about what we're doing now.
Yeah, well, I'm excited. I think what Core Scientific is doing is amazing. You guys made an incredible comeback over the past few years. So this has been wonderful speaking with you. If our listeners want to get in touch with you, are you on Twitter or is Core Scientific?
So Core Scientific is on Twitter. Core Scientific's on LinkedIn. We have our website, corescientific.com. I'm, of course, on Twitter, just Russell Cann. I'm on LinkedIn as well, Russell Cann. And we're on all the social media. So we have a team that answers those things too.
Great, Russell. Well, this has been so interesting, and I can't wait to hear more from Core Scientific.
All right, thanks, Rachel.
Thanks. Thanks to JTX Media for the video and audio production behind this podcast, based out of Austin, Texas. Finally, thanks to the listeners for tuning in. Please be sure to subscribe, like, and share. I'll see you guys next time.